Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's that time of the year again. Madam FM has presented a record 9th union budget. We are gathered here on this Sunday afternoon, where we are going to spend the next hour and a bit on a very engaging discussion with some very eminent panelists. Just coming to the budget, I think it reflects government's commitment to reforms, Make in India, and an enhanced ease of doing business, which will continue. All this is aimed firmly in the direction of becoming a Viksit Bharat as the PM's vision. We at Grant Thornton Bharat have chosen to influence 6 pillars of Indian economy's growth, what we call ecosystems. They are global value chain and FDI, represented by my colleague Krishan, regulatory, represented by my colleagues Vivek and Richa, inclusion and inclusive growth, we have my fellow partner Raman, climate and energy transition, Amit Kumar, automation and AI, another Amit, but Amit Khanna, private capital, last but not the least, a pillar that Pallavi, my colleague, and I will talk about. I'm also delighted to have on our panel Dr. Jaijit Bhattacharya, a noted economist and president of Center for Digital Economy and Policy Research. Without further ado, Jaijit, maybe I can start with you. We have an economist amongst us, so we have to pick on you. With steady growth of over 7%, a focus on youth and women, and a shifting global order, what is your macro view on India's progress towards the vision of Viksit Bharat?
Obviously, if you look at the big numbers, and you already quoted the numbers, we are growing at 7% growth rate on an annual basis, which is humongous for any large economy. We are well galloping down the path of Viksit Bharat. But there are many, many externalities that are there to be tackled. And we have seen multiple shocks even in this year. In fact, from COVID onwards, we have been having a shock after shock every single year. So what we expected from this budget was to make sure that those shocks are absorbed and we continue to be on that path. And I think to that extent, this budget has delivered quite well. I think one of the headline numbers is 4.3. That's a fiscal deficit that has been targeted, which brings us back to the same fiscal deficit glide path that we had to abandon during COVID. So we are back on track in that sense. And why is this number so important? Is because specifically if you look at it in comparison with the revenue deficit number, which is about 1.5, that means 3% of the GDP is being put into capital expenditure. More importantly, by keeping the revenue deficit and the fiscal deficit under control, the government is signaling that I'm not going to go out and borrow more money, and therefore I'll leave money for the private sector to come in. So it's a signaling that the government is willing to step back, and therefore by not crowding out the capital market, we are keeping the cost of capital low. So it is really time for the private sector to step in and start making those investments that they'd always planned to do. The fact that about 3% is being spent on capital, which is about 12.2 lakh crores, which will be spent on capex, is going into very high quality infrastructure. What we see is futuristic infrastructure being committed. We see inland waterways coming out. We see high-speed trains, which is bullet trains. 7 more routes that has been declared. All of this will go back into actually further growing this economy, because as we know, when you invest into infrastructure, the multiplier effect is 2.2. So for every rupee put in, we are going to get back 2.2 rupees. And a lot of this rollout will be done by the private sector. So there is tremendous amount of opportunity that we see coming in because of the investments by the government in infrastructure, while not borrowing too much of money from the capital market, which allows the private sector to borrow cheap and start investing. The other key feature of this budget that we see, and what you said in your question, is the women focus. One of the key components of the economy besides land, labor, capital is within labor participation. 50% of our labor, which is women, seem to be underrepresented in the labor force. And therefore, we see a lot of skill development support in the budget. for women. We see a lot of allocations for women entrepreneurs and a push for women to actually come out and participate in the labor force and also set up their own entrepreneurial ventures. So overall, it seemed like a very good budget to support the continued growth of India. And also, let's keep in mind the larger geo-economic issues that are going on in the background. We lost about $40 billion of exports because of the US administration's policies. And we had to scramble back and get our exports back on track, which is where at a very high speed the government fixed its GST structures, which led to an increased consumption in the domestic market, as well as had a number of deals outside, which led to our exports actually growing in spite of losing $40 billion in terms of market. So what this budget is basically trying to do is ensure that when such future shocks come in, we are able to respond to the shocks and we have a resilient economy in place.
Very interesting, Jaijit. I think the word resilience, it echoes for me personally a very important element of any economy, any business. And as you rightly said, growth continues to be there. We are a major economy, but we need to be resilient. We cannot control what's happening in the world. You also touched upon, capex. How important is capex? It's I'm going to, invite my colleague Krishan. Since global value chains and FDI is an area that's important for us as a firm, and ask him a question. Krishan, if I may, what are the key initiatives in this budget that could help revive global investment into India amid this geopolitical uncertainty and somewhat slowing down our FDI flows?
So Sid, you talked about global FDI and the challenges currently, the geopolitical shifts and the tariffs challenges which we are facing. I think the timing couldn't be apt when we just had a mother of all FDIs, as we call it, for the India-EU trade pact coming in. I think with the UK, with the EU, now so many of these trade pacts already on our way, it needs to automatically be seen that in the next 1 or 2 years, how will they pan out in terms of inviting more and more global investment into India, because it is just not opening the manufacturing sector, but it's also opening a lot of subsectors for services as well. Now that's something which is already happening, because those things are already on the cards because the announcements have been made. But if I talk about the budget, there were cues from which you can see that it was a pro-investment budget, which was signal actually a strong support for foreign and domestic investment also. But amidst the global uncertainties, I think a record capex, commitment to about 12.2 trillion INR to logistics sector, industrial corridors, urban infrastructure. This all, again envisions and enhances the complete commitment of bringing the complete supply chain competitiveness in India. That's something which has been, continuing to be an initiative which is going on. But I think with this fresh allocation and commitment, truly opens up the dialogue again for the further enhancement of infrastructure sector and penetration into not just tier 1 but tier 2 and tier 3 cities. The second one being the financial ease and the ease of doing business. I think from that perspective, extending the tax holidays for GIFT City, which has gone to about 25 years as a block, higher investment or portfolio for non-residents in India, and also talking about the tax holidays around creating the data centers in India, etc. I think all of these things, and my colleagues will talk about it more, but these things show the fact that India is open to getting more and more foreign players to come into India, strategically partner with Indian joint ventures, or come and set up directly their shops in India. And that is something which reinforces the fact that India is becoming a stable financial hub. If I talk about the China plus diversification, I think we got cues in terms of the sector focus which we heard from the budget speech, specifically on manufacturing, semiconductors, clean energy, and MSME scale up. I think that was a very strong signal in terms of how the Indian MSME and the SMEs focus also is something which has been clearly given importance this time. Other than that, I think it's very important to also look at the reforms from a investor-friendly reforms from a tax and regulatory standpoint. If you talk about digital trade facilitation, I think a lot of simplification procedures have been introduced again from the perspective of who is an honest taxpayer and how should you be benefited. So custom procedure simplification was very important from that perspective. And rate rationalization is an activity which has been ongoing. I would have imagined and probably expected a further tweaking in terms of reducing the number of tariffs. But I think whatever's happened is not something which is bad. It is still positive in terms of the simplification. I think it still reinforces the move that India is not just looking at becoming a gatekeeper for the purpose of international trade, but also becoming a more practically implementing policies and procedures from an inbound perspective as far as trade facilitation measures are concerned. And I think the growth actually lies with the stability, because if you see the balancing act of the fiscal discipline with the policy certainty, infrastructure readiness and sector-led initiatives which position India as resilient, as Jaijit also called it, integrating global value chain as a destination for India becomes paramount. Only thing probably I would have wanted to hear more would have been maybe on the PLI front, where this would have been a direct opportunity for us to also club something immediately for the interest of the global investors, to see certain additional sectors which were being looked at as thrust sectors, sectors like footwear, sectors like sports, sector like when these sectors are the sectors where India is looking at investment. And that's something would have been probably, it would have been icing on the cake if we would have heard something, a new scheme being announced. But that can be done outside of the budget also. Let's hope something happens on that.
Thanks, Krishan. I think, if I were to summarize, India's competitive advantage as part of the global economy has to be worked on continuously. I think this is a budget which points us in the right direction. I think you also talked a lot about stability and how important it is to display that stability to continue to be attractive to foreign inflows in particular. That brings me, I'm going to ask Vivek, our regulatory ecosystem leader. Stability was a key theme of this budget, Vivek, and alongside fiscal discipline, sustainable growth and inflation management. How do you assess the banking sector reforms in this context?
So, interestingly, from the whole 2047 Viksit Bharat initiative, the growth in the real economy needs to be supported by the entire financial services ecosystem, and banking is a significant part of that ecosystem. So, from that perspective, the banking reforms are extremely necessary to ensure that the growth path that we actually envisage is supported adequately by the underlying financial services ecosystem. From a bank, and given that banking is an important part of the same ecosystem, the reforms from a banking standpoint have actually been mentioned as a creation of a high-level steering committee to drive the reforms. Now, one of the questions that actually came as a part of the whole media interactions that I did was that, don't you think that the high-level steering committee of banking reforms was just a very generic statement, a high-level statement? Honestly, it's actually the point of view is to the contrary. To me, it reflects a great amount of respect for institutional independence for organizations like the Reserve Bank of India. How can you actually drive the whole banking reforms on your own through a budget without actually using the independent institution like the Reserve Bank of India? Part one. So to me, that reflects a great amount of respect for institutional independence, which is a great credit positive from a country standpoint. The second piece is that the banking reforms that are actually needed is rationalization of the entire banking ecosystem, because today we have scheduled commercial banks, we have differentiated bank licenses, we have urban cooperative banks, we have rural cooperative banks. Rationalizing the urban cooperative banking ecosystem, bringing more scheduled commercial banks, bringing more differentiated licenses. So consolidation and competition, as well as rationalization of investment norms to ensure that there is more capital attracted into the ecosystem, as well as a lot of focus on customer conduct. The initiatives are many. And the best way probably to do it was to actually suggest a creation of a high-level steering committee, which ensures that a lot more reforms can actually be driven instead of basically picking the best three. So in my view, this was an interesting choice because you could actually create a framework for driving major reforms. And to me, primarily, that kind of stood out significantly from a banking standpoint. And to me, that's a big credit positive from an overall rating standpoint, given that cost of capital is an important focus area, as we also read it in the economic survey. the most important part of a cost of capital is a sovereign credit rating. And with the focus on the real economy growth as well as the support from the banking ecosystem, I do believe that it's a credit positive which could impact the cost of capital from a long-term standpoint.
Vivek, I want to just stay with you. We've talked about banking reforms. The backbone of India's manufacturing sector is, what I like to call the middle market, or what's referred as MSME sector. How will the MSME sector benefit from the proposed liquidity measures, particularly the one, the TREDS based asset-backed securities?
So it's quite interesting. The biggest challenge for a MSME ecosystem is liquidity. I'll give an example. You create a small organization and you get a big contract and you service them, but you don't get paid on time. That significantly has an ability to impact your business. So it was in a way disincentivizing you from growing big. So the MSME ecosystem was never incentivized to grow. By addressing conditions like liquidity, you essentially are helping them grow. It's a very simple. They have a GEM portal for basically in terms of giving procurement contracts out, using the same contracts, taking the invoices from there, and actually in terms of discounting them and then making asset-backed securities for creating a liquidity is a great initiative. I mean, just imagine if there is an entire secondary market created for asset-backed securities with enough liquidity, how much of that support would get extended to the MSME ecosystem. And liquidity is one of the biggest challenges that they face. Getting AIFs, venture capital funds, private equities to actually look at this ecosystem and create both the demand for such products will also help in the long run by creating more asset classes. So bringing the savers and the investors together for the right kind of asset classes to support the MSME ecosystem. So I would say financialization of invoices is the biggest solution of support from a liquidity standpoint for MSMEs. So in my view, a great initiative because it is genuinely addressing a real problem.
Vivek, interesting. I think rebalance of liquidity to flow into what I would call the backbone. Today, in the current scenario, I think the largest corporations get the maximum amount of liquidity. So this will hopefully spur growth from that part. Let's also talk a little bit about the side that we often don't want to address, and I'd like to bring Raman, our inclusion and inclusive growth leader. Raman, my next question to you is India becoming fiscally constrained on social spending? How has the allocation or approach changed compared to the previous year? And what does that signal about government priorities?
So, I think the brief answer is no. But I think the method in which how you approach social security or social areas is getting somewhat transformed. Earlier it was more about, the cash transfers, the benefits, directly giving money. Right now, while that will continue, but there are cues enough to look at where the government wants to focus. It's more in terms of, capacity building of the people, the livelihood support, helping the women's move up the value chain from SHGs, which is self-help group, to She-Mart, which is moving a step towards the market. So I think in all the directions, if you look at, it is more on moving away from just handing over the benefit to making them ready for the market. If you look at the incremental spending of the government, I think earlier it was all going to, and thanks to COVID, going to various incentives and subsidies like fertilizer and all those things, social welfare measures. Now it is almost 40% of it is in productive investment, which is around 30% goes into the infrastructure creation, and 9 to 10% goes in human capital development, which is important, and that's where I see the shift happening as compared to the previous years.
I think our human capital or demographic advantage is a massive, competitive advantage for the country, and it's good to see the view that the government's focus to move inclusion from just handing over SOPs to people rather than now focusing on impact-based support. I think one key area for our Viksit Bharat direction and energy security is around energy transition and climate. Amit, I'm going to ask you a rather long question. Government signaled a strong commitment to energy transition, as we all know, and making it an investable reality, which is critical for achieving our 500 gigawatt of renewables by 2030 target and net zero by 2070. What are the key budget announcements this year that you believe will help India stay on this path? We also had an interesting announcement around restructuring of PFC and RECL. Amit, how do you read that in this context?
Thanks, Ed. So this budget in a way is a reinforcement of the commitment which is there for quite some time from the government, both at the center and also the respective state governments as well. Now you mentioned about the 500 gigawatt of renewable which will come into the system by 2030. What is required is the stabilization of the grid, and for which what you need is the battery storage, the pumped storage system. For battery storage, for the first time in the budget, what I have noted is that there is a complete ecosystem which is trying to be built by the government. I'll give you 2-3 examples of this. Number one, they are saying that the basic custom duty exemption for batteries, the parts of the batteries which will be imported, which is very much required. But even before that, they have gone to critical minerals. That what the government is saying, capital goods used in the critical mineral ecosystem will also be exempted from the custom duty. And third, not only that, they are creating an ecosystem around this whole piece. What they are saying, rare earth, dedicated rare earth corridors in the coastal states, starting from Odisha and then going all down south, they are saying that these corridors would be required. Now why this is important? Because in the given geopolitical scenario where one country is playing hardball and stopping the export of these critical minerals, it becomes important for a country like India, and with 500 gigawatt immediately in 2030 and much more beyond that, to have this ecosystem getting locally developed, domestically developed. What I foresee is that not only the domestic players, but even the global biggies will come and invest money in the technology, which will create this ecosystem more vibrant. That is one part. Now, government is not just looking at 2030, as you rightly said, that by 2070 net zero commitment is there. So, carbon capture and storage is very important element for energy guzzlers, large metal companies, cement, steel, power, and so on and so forth. So 5 sectors, such industrial sectors have been identified, and government is saying not just pilot have been conducted in 2 or 3 refineries in India already. They are saying 20,000 crore rupee allocation. We'll have to see the details in the budget, of course, later on. But 20,000 crore rupees of commitment from government of India to go beyond pilot, large scale carbon capture and storage. So this is a complete ecosystem around the net zero which government of India sees. There could have been, 1 or 2 more announcements pertaining to say green hydrogen, right, or 1 or 2 more such areas. But this is a big step in that direction, as I foresee. Now, you mentioned about the PFC and REC. These are the 2 large NBFCs which have been created under the Ministry of Power, and their mandate was to provide financing, large-scale financing to India's energy sector, distribution and transmission to start with, and later on they diversified into other sectors. Finance Minister, in her speech, also mentioned that cost of capital, and Vivek also alluded to this, that cost of capital has to be brought down. And these 2 players, REC and PFCs, are moving in that direction. They went with the green bond issue in Japan and abroad, but that is just very small piece in the whole game. So I think with the restructuring, they will be allowed to access global capital. Second, PFC already holds a majority stake in REC. We'll have to see the details whether this is being created as a one large behemoth who can provide money to the energy sector as it is coming up. And we all know that now energy is not just transmission and distribution. There's a lot of manufacturing which is required, whether it is energy storage, green hydrogen, and these are capex intensive, right? So maybe REC and PFC structuring will make that happen as well.
Thanks, Amit. I think for us to become a developed economy or Viksit Bharat, I think energy security and energy self-sufficiency is a very important pillar in that. And I think, again, secular direction, look at the entire stack and address it from the grassroots till the top level, which is, generation of energy and the various parts of it, including financing. I think it's augurs very well. I'm just going to, bring in Amit Khanna, our automation and AI ecosystem leader. Amit, how do you think tax holiday for cloud service providers will impact India's AI ecosystem?
Yeah, so I think, Sid, the way I will say it, when I hear our finance ministers talking about the tax holiday, that was perhaps my aha moment in the whole budget speech. Because if AI has to grow, we need an infrastructure. And to have an infrastructure, we need large investment, we need large data centers. All of that is actually happening, but happening at a very, very slow pace. The whole dream of making India as the AI solution and services hub cannot happen until unless I have plenty of that. And I think with this, I will see a lot of global hyperscalers coming into India, setting up data centers. This will not only help them setting up the cloud services, but will create an ecosystem of AI solutions. Because ultimately, the whole cloud hosting is only one part of the services. The major value added part comes on the solution and the services which happen on that cloud. So this will actually help promoting the whole AI ecosystem, and predominantly it's for export, so the whole solution will also go for export, right? So we will literally be able to take care of the global lead, rather the whole global aspiration which Finance Minister put in today of having 10% global share in services. This will be a big component in that in terms of providing the whole services around AI and automation area. The other thing which I think will also have an immediate impact in terms of reskilling of some of the people, because they will be developing more and more AI solution. Unfortunately, India perhaps has the largest number of tech or digital folks or digitally literate folks who can actually develop those solutions. And I think that will also help creating more entrepreneurship opportunities, some more jobs. So there will be more employment, this will come in. I think that's a very interesting piece. Though I also want to put two cautions in place. The tax is only one incentive which is needed, but there are still some hurdles which need to be handled too, right? One, of course, how will I convince my global corporation to bring the data into Indian data centers, right? There are still some doubts which people have to follow. I think we can win over it, but we need to do that very effectively. Means we have shown doing it when the large corporates have set their global capability centers in India, but we need to be more defined on that. And I think the second big caution is, do we really have resources to run that large data centers? Means Amit was talking about energy. When I create large data centers here, I require heavy energies, right? So where is that energy going to come from? Do we have that investment there which can take care of that? I think that's the other caution which I will put in.
I'm going to bring, Amit, again, from an energy transition perspective. Amit just talked about the ingredients to being a leader in, AI. The impetus on data centers, focus on AI and automation. We also need to address one of the most important pieces, which is energy, right? You need to fire them up. Energy sits at the core of the entire tech stack and architecture. Amit, how do you see energy security in the context of tech, automation, and AI ambitions of the country?
Very true. Just to give you one data, 2024 total energy consumed globally by the data center was of the order of 400 plus terawatt hours. Now in 2030, this is going to be just double, at least double, up to 940 plus kind of terawatt hour. So you can see one, that energy demand. So data centers are nothing but energy guzzlers, in fact. So what is required? Number one, and everybody who is promoting data center or establishing these centers anywhere in the world is trying to utilize only the renewable energy so that they can claim that this is a green, clean kind of a setup, and this is required as well, right? So you will require, number one, lot of investment into renewable energy generation. And most important, and the critical aspects is, how do you feed that power to one data center or one load center? And if I can give you example, we have heard about 5 gigawatt or even up to 10 gigawatt kind of a load center, one single location from a data center perspective. So no system, nowhere globally has the system of transmission and distribution have been designed to accommodate that kind of a demand from one single location. So a lot of investment will be required even from the transmission and distribution center side. Third, how this can be achieved, and I'll go back to what Amit Khanna said, that AI-powered smart grid technologies, AI-powered smart grid technologies probably will be the best answer to provide a solution for transmission and distribution. Early days yet, but every power supplier, distribution company, transmission company, and the policymakers and planners are struggling with this. Even in US, we have seen that in California. That is the question. I think it's time now for Indian policymakers and stakeholders to come together and provide an answer to this as well. Over to you, sir.
I think the government and the entire ecosystem on energy transition in India will have to be at the forefront if we have to make this transition. If we have to drive the leadership in AI and tech stack, energy is a critical area, and just waiting for things to happen is not the solution. I think you put it very rightly, that we need to be at the forefront of this. We need to innovate. We need to have the best minds working on it with government's supports, of course. Amit, I'm just going to digress away from climate and ask you a question which was very pointed in the budget. There is a renewed focus on tourism, especially in areas like heritage tourism and medical tourism. What impact do you see on the broader tourism industry and job creation on the back of this area in the budget?
Sure, Sid. I think this again is for the first time that in budget a focused plan and action on top of it has been announced for related to tourism. And tourism, government is not looking just from the lens of just developing few tourist sites or strengthening those. They are expanding. First time we have seen a focus on the eastern and the northeastern states. Example, northeastern states, majority of the northeastern states you will find, government has said that we will develop Buddhist circuits there. It's already the ecosystem of Buddhist circuits, which is there, but they are going to strengthen it further. More and more investment will go into it. We have seen large number of tourists coming from Southeast Asia, Japan, other places who want to visit, but they just come to Gaya and one or two more such places in India. I think this circuit will help them in expanding or spending more time in India on that aspect. Second, they are also saying that, again, the second focus on the eastern and the northeastern India is Durgapur is being established as a hub, and industrial corridors along with the tourist circuits will be developed on that corridor itself. So they are linking tourism or tourist industry with the industrial centers so that it is a complete ecosystem which is helping the cause. Third, seaplane. Now, those of us who have traveled to Maldives and all such islands, we have seen that seaplane is quite an important part of the overall tourism circuits. So India is saying that now we will give a leg up to the seaplane industry, and I feel that places like Maldives, Pondicherry, even Goa, you will find, and even in Gujarat, that a lot of seaplanes will be utilized for this purpose. There are there is a population who vouch for that and who can spend that much money. So government is saying that VGF scheme will be rolled out for rolling out of this seaplane scheme. Lastly, medical tourism. Medical tourism on its own has been there for quite some time now, last few years, but government wants to develop it as an industry now. So what they are saying, 5 medical hubs will be established. So you will find that hospital chains, this medical industry will establish the center, and it will be a kind of a one-stop shop for those who want medical attention, who want cheaper and best quality kind of a medical attention to the country. Now overall, from the employment generation, Sid, as you asked, from the employment generation perspective, tourism probably is the only industry who gives employment to every strata of the economy, right? From the lowest one to the highest one. Hotels and the industries will develop, but at the same time, one very specific, I would like to draw your attention on that, 10,000 guides will be skilled in this industry. That's very much needed in India. So skill development of the guides so that they are better prepared to serve these tourists, that's a direct employment kind of a thing. But at the same time, the ecosystem which gets developed gives employment to the local people as well.
So very strategic, pointed direction in the budget on tourism, leveraging, I think, the strengths that we already have, whether it's heritage or medical tourism, thinking very strategically about which corridors to invest behind. And at the heart of it, this will lead to extensive job creation in the services sector across a very broad-based, human resources, that we have in the country. Just staying on, a minute on job creation, I'm going to bring Amit Khanna back in. Again, services sector job creation. Amit, how do you think that the creation of services sector panel to assess the impact of AI and automation on jobs is sufficient? Or were you expecting some additional measures?
No, I think it's a very interesting point, right? So as government very clearly recognize AI as a force multiplier. So there's one thing which is direct AI. We spoke about AI infrastructure, we spoke about AI solution. But quite a lot of announcement which government made will require AI to come in for it to be successful. And I think that's a very, very important point. The government actually announced this tool called Bharat Vistar for agriculture, which is an AI tool of connecting all agricultural systems around available in the country so that we can provide a kind of a boost to the productivity of the farmers, right? Similarly, when the government spoke about hospitality, or similarly the government spoke about the ABGC, right? They're very, very clearly talking about AI as a layer or automation as a layer to make it successful. Now to do that, one of the challenges is, do we have the right skilled manpower? And for the first time in the budget, there is a formal recognition of the fact that there may be some job displacement which will happen because of this whole AI and automation. Now, job displacement is not a bad thing. We all have seen with every wave of technology, every wave of innovation, jobs have moved from A to B, but it also creates a challenge of reskilling this large workforce which we have. It's just not about saying that I will train people in the skill they need to perform on, but I need to train people that how will they use the new age AI system as such, because if they can't use it, the world is moving towards that. So my view is it's a very, very good move to actually put a commission to look at what kind of job displacement that will happen, what kind of reskilling it will require, what actions do we need to take. But the whole thing is the actual evidence will come when this will hit the ground and how fast it can move. One of the problems today we all have seen with AI and automation as such is perhaps the technology wave is moving much faster than the on-ground wave of implementation. Right? So if I don't catch up the speed with which technology is developing, I may still miss it. But I think this is definitely a move in the right direction.
It's a good starting point. At least it's been brought to, officially on the budget and will drive changes. Inclusion, is an important part of how we approach the ecosystem that we want to influence. And Raman, we've talked about, job creation. With this push around job creation, with a multi-sectoral approach expected to drive growth, the other component around making India more inclusive and Viksit would be healthcare, and including the rural economy, particularly women and children. Jaijit talked a little bit about women. How do you see these announcements pushing us towards a more inclusive India or Bharat?
Yeah, Sid, so first of all, on the inclusive side, I would like to react. I think the push is coming from just making it inclusive, where government goes to them and tells them, okay, you please do this work and I'll support you. If you look at SHGs, government has been focusing on financial inclusions through various banks, reaching out to the villages to help the women folks. Largely SHGs are, a significant part of the SHGs are women, and that's where the support and hand-holding has been happening traditionally. Right now, in this budget, the government says, please do forward integration, move to the retail stores, she-marts, where you start to interact directly with the customers. Now, how does it help? It helps if you are directly interacting with the customers, your product design, your product quality, all that gets direct feedback into the thing and you create more value out of the system. So I think that's the focus the government is making. The second thing is, if you look at, again, inclusivity, if you look at the agriculture side, the government is focusing on saying that, okay, please be much more competitive on the products which are relevant in the international arena. For example, cocoa, coconut. How can we create more value for them? How can their incomes be increased in focusing in these products? I think that's the other part. Government did talk about, skilling of the Divyang population in making them much more job relevant. Now, and then lastly, if you looking at the northeast side, you are looking at regional inclusion, where some of the issues pertaining to the tourism, Buddhist circuits being talked about, and that affecting the lowest strata of the society. These things are helping the government, or at least government is looking at inclusion from a different lens in this budget. If you look at the medical and the health side, I think some of my colleagues did talk about the medical tourism part, which is a very important element. But I think apart from the skilling side, where it was not focused enough, the main challenge coming in the medical tourism is, if you put it at a right place, you don't get quality doctors because they multitask and they are relevant in the metros. So I think that amount of ecosystem need to get created. I think probably it will follow in the years to come. It does talk about having AHPs, allied health professionals, 1 lakh in the next 5 years being created. That's also, looking at the objective of having enough population addressing the geriatric population. People are going old while we are youngest, but if you go by the count of the people, we also have one of the largest old population which is prone to disease, illness, etc. And in today's world, where it is a nuclear family, those people are left behind. So we need a workforce, we need to create jobs for people where these people also get taken care of from the healthcare side. If you look at it has talked about 1.5 lakh caregivers for this in the next 1 year itself, which is a very large number to focus on. It is also talking about, creating of, NIMHANS equivalent. I mean, she made a very particular point. In the North India, you don't have any hospital worth its name for mental health. So that's where she was talking about creation of those mental health hospitals in the North India, which is something different. And then every district hospital to improve 50% for trauma patients, the 50% of their capacity for trauma patients. So I think these nuances are very, very, after a detailed study to understand that this is the requirement of the day and we need to focus on it, but at the same time start creating jobs for people, skilling people, and I think that's just the beginning. Probably in the years to come, we'll have much more focused interventions, and shifting from giving, dole outs to making them capable of earning their own livelihood.
Thanks, Raman. I think, the shift in focus from just helping the laggards from a job market perspective to helping the laggards become leaders in specific areas. I think it's a sea shift in the approach of the government. Even from a healthcare standpoint, I think addressing not just the past and the current, but also the future, as you talked about, that we have a fit workforce and we have enough capacity in that sector to look after our aging population will help the economy be more resilient. Jaijit, we talked about resilience when we started. I want to come to you and talk about building the infrastructure for a future-ready Bharat, and manufacturing in strategic sectors have been announced. I'd like you to share your thoughts on their importance in becoming Viksit Bharat by 2047.
No, very interesting point, because if you notice the focus of the budget, it's on future industries and future infrastructure. We have seen, for example, data centers, a tax rebate till 2047, which is exactly a similar policy that Ireland followed in order to in fact save their economy. They were just going under. And they gave these tax breaks to attract the big techs, and therefore we see most of the big techs being based in Ireland. A similar policy in India I'm sure, is going to attract a lot of data centers into India and boost what Amit was talking about, AI infrastructure in this country. And that's what I meant by futuristic infrastructure. So it's data centers, AI, nuclear energy. I mean, the question again that Amit raised, that what is going to power these data centers is going to be nuclear energy, besides many other energy. And therefore, many significant steps have been taken around nuclear energy. Then there is a focus on biologics. The new kind of drugs is based on biologics. And we have been a laggard in biologics, even though we are a pharmaceutical capital of the world. So there is a significant focus on pushing biologics in this country. In terms of infrastructure for logistics, Europe carries 40% of its cargo on inland waterway. We carry hardly 6 to 7%. So this budget is trying to push that 6 to 7 to 14%. And therefore, a number of waterways have been announced. Work will be started off. Along with the inland waterways, there is also a push on coastal waterways. And coastal shipping makes, reduces the cost of logistics very, very significantly. I've also jotted down a few other infrastructure points that was mentioned. 5,000 crore allocation for the city economic region over 5 years. And this is the fourth attempt to better our cities. Yes, there was JNNURM 1, JNNURM 2, the smart cities. And now, as a logical next step, it's the city economic region. Again, that's a huge infrastructure project. The coastal cargo promotion I talked about, and then an infra risk guarantee fund to ensure that the private sector is able to invest into large infrastructure projects, which is backed by the risk guarantee fund. Then the India Semiconductor Mission, again a futuristic industry. The electronic manufacturing scheme outlay again increased to 40,000 crores. That's massive. I think a couple of other things we may want to also look at is the fact that some of the things that Amit mentioned about tourism in the Northeast, which is a Buddhist circuit, it also has a geopolitical resonance, because the key part of the Buddhist circuit in Northeast will be the Tawang Monastery. And by ensuring that foreigners come in under an Indian visa and visit it, will reduce and diminish the geopolitical noise coming from our northern neighbors. Similarly, there's a huge push on textile infrastructure and end-to-end dominance in textile. It needs to be looked at in the context of the EU-India FTA that we are signing. And we have now got access to the European market at the same terms, if not better than what Pakistan has. Do keep in mind that the two key parts of Pakistan's economy is agriculture based on water, threatened by the Indus Water Treaty, and second is textiles, which is 60% of their exports, largely to Europe. And therefore, many aspects of what this budget is looking at is also geopolitical, geostrategic, and hence the infrastructure build-out is focusing on not just the domestic aspects, but also the global positioning of India. In fact, the geriatric focus that was mentioned is not just to serve the Indian old people, but also the global people, because we've got one of the youngest populations in the world, whereas if you look at Europe and Japan and so on, they do need support for their old people, and where are they going to get the people from? If we have a trained work manpower in India, then thanks to the clauses around skill exchange that is being signed under the free trade agreements, we will be able to freely supply them to other economies of the world. And hence it's a very comprehensively thought out budget, looking at multiple aspects, not just the domestic requirements, but also our positioning in the world.
Jay, that's a very interesting spin, right? using the economic power actually as a tool to balance out geopolitical pressures, and especially neighbors who tend to be a thorn on our side. I think that perspective, that instead of engaging in war, build an economy which is strong, resilient, very competitive, and take the battle globally rather than looking at it on the border. So no, that's a very very interesting spin. I'm going to now pivot to private capital, and that is really the front and center of India's economy when we talk about entrepreneurs and capital that is represented by foreign investors plus family offices. And Pallavi, specifically around that, there is always this noise around ease of doing business. So my question to you is that the budget proposes several measures to reduce litigation. Do you see these as meaningful or largely incremental?
No, I think they're definitely meaningful. This government has had a long-stated agenda of ensuring that the interaction between the taxpayer and the tax administration is not adversarial. Taking away tax terrorism was part of the manifesto of this government when it came into power. And I think we've incrementally seen, steps being taken to achieve that. A couple of years back, we had this introduction of something called NUDGE, a very craftily chosen acronym, which was a way of, in a very non-intrusive way, telling people information that's available about their transactions in the public domain, for them to sort of make sure, if there's some correction they want to do to their tax return or not. And I think the economic survey this time has a lot of statistics around how all these measures have led to larger contribution of direct tax. So I'm not surprised that, they've chosen to do a couple of things this time. And I'll sort of quickly talk through them. One, of course, is the advance pricing agreement. Now, that's a very important tool that's available to companies that have foreign transactions with related parties to decide on, what should be your markup and profit. And these agreements, there was no timeline prescribed for them. So, while an APA agreement is valid for 5 years, it was taking you almost 4 years to get a conclusion on a unilateral APA. So I think it's very nice they brought in a timeline where they've said within 2 years, you need to conclude the APA. However, they've given an extension of 6 months, but specifically at the behest of the applicant. So if the taxpayer wants that, that is available. Then I think from a majority of taxpayers' perspective, minor things like they've increased the time limit for being able to file a revised return, which was earlier 31st December, you now have it till 31st of March. The other thing is, if you were in the midst of a reassessment proceeding, typically, whatever was the outcome of the assessing officers, what you had to live with, and then you had to sort of go back and appeal. And there was a whole sort of appellate process that followed. I think now they've given the leeway to say that if you agree with what the assessment is going to be on the back of the proceedings that are on, you can accept it, pay an incremental tax, and close it there. I think it's just very encouraging because, especially for small taxpayers, the whole process of litigating and appealing, can be quite formidable in terms of time and cost involvement. I think the other interesting one, and Krishan alluded to it earlier, is the safe harbor rules that they've brought in. And these have been specific to the IT industry. Now, within IT industry, it's not that we've not had safe harbor rules earlier. There were rules around safe harbor. But, there was a lot of litigation because IT in itself is a very broad spectrum. So you could be an IT-enabled service, you could be a KPO, you could be a BPO, you could be a contract R&D facility. And each of them had different percentages, that you could apply. And therefore, litigation that arose there, while you did say safe harbor, but the income tax always litigated your categorization. Are you a KPO which is holding out to be just a BPO? And that used to cause a lot of litigation. I think now what they've done, at least from a litigation perspective, it's great, but I'm sure it's going to cause some angst to KPOs and contract R&D units because for them, the limits, the percentage that they've prescribed, which is 15.5%, is significantly lower than what some of the high-end, outsourcing outfits were getting. But I think, again, it's an attempt at taking away all subjectivity in classification. I think for cloud services, again, as we heard, again, safe harbor rules have been brought. They've said 15% and, that's it, you can do business. I think all of these help tremendously. The last one, and I think that's a very, very interesting one, is on Black Money Act. So, there's been a lot of issues that the government has had with people underreporting their foreign assets and their foreign source of incomes. So in 2015, we had the Black Money Act. And when that was brought in, of course, there was a period when people, could do a declaration. But what they'd also done is they'd set a threshold limit that, if it's movable assets, anything other than movable property up to 20 lakhs, then there would be no penalty, but there was prosecution. Now they've taken away that line of prosecution with retrospective effect. So with effect from October 2024, there is no prosecution. The other interesting thing that they've done is, and this is something born out of personal experience as well, where we've seen a lot of students who come back after studying abroad. You don't realize you've got a bank account with some very minimum balance lying there. You've got people who go on deputation to work abroad, who've got ESOPs or restricted stock options. You, for whatever reasons, fail to sort of declare those. So they have created this category, what they're calling as category A and category B, which is largely around, like I said, students, young professionals who worked abroad and come back, or NRIs who are relocating back, where they've said that if you have not disclosed any foreign sourced income or assets, then the limit is 1 crore. You have to fall under this amnesty scheme that they're going to open for 6 months. If you've disclosed the income, but for whatever reasons, missed out on disclosing the assets, then the limit is 5 crores. And they will now open a window where you can go and do a self-declaration and, get this normalized. Now, this is huge because under the Black Money Act, you not only paid a tax of 30%, you paid a penalty of another 30%, and there was prosecution, which was rigorous imprisonment up to 10 years. So fairly intimidating. So I think this has been a very, very good move in taking away, inadvertent, and that it's in itself, I must sort of add this bit. I picked this up in the speech of the finance minister when she said that in a lot of fines and penalties are now going to be called a fee. So I think even the tone and tenor in which they're dealing with the taxpayer is changing pretty substantively. So in this whole amnesty scheme, which I talked about, where there was category A and B with those different thresholds, you just have to pay a nominal fee of 1 lakh rupees, and penalty and prosecution gets dropped. So I think it's a good, very, very good effort in that direction.
No, absolutely. I think the process of compliance is being simplified, if I was to sum it as that.
Absolutely.
Again, the fear of litigation is being removed to some extent so that people step forward. I think on that, Pallavi, I think one very specific thing on buyback tax, right? How does the change in the buyback tax help, as promoters will still continue to pay taxes as before?
So this is an interesting one, and I'm surprised why the markets have not picked it up, because there's a lot to cheer here. So just to step back a little bit, buyback tax was something, which was imposed on companies every time they did a buyback. The government obviously and the tax administration, they obviously thought that, this was a more tax effective way of taking dividends out and your surpluses out of a company. So they went and sort of rescinded it and said that if you did a buyback, it would be treated as dividends, which would then be taxable at your rate of taxation was typically around 30%. I think what they've done now is they've categorized the income arising from buyback as capital gains. But they don't want it to be seen as this is something that's being done for the benefit of the rich or the promoters. So they've said that the rich, or the promoters in this case, will continue to pay tax at the rate at which they would have earlier. So while it's capital gains, they have done an additional tax to bring it back to what they would have paid had this been dividend income. So really what that means is, if you're a corporate shareholder, you will pay tax at 22%. If you're an individual promoter shareholder, you will pay tax at 30%. But if you're an average investor who's invested in a company, this is now capital gains for you, you will pay 12.5%. So there's a significant amount of relief that's been given to shareholders. And I think, like they say, the devil is always in the detail. When you read the postscript to this change, they've also said that this is not applicable to promoters. And promoters is normally described as, what you hold out as a promoter under the Companies Act, or people who hold more than 10% shareholding in a company. So I think this is going to work very well for listed companies, which have large shareholders. And while promoters may not benefit, but I'm sure a lot of them would want to go down this route to make sure their shareholders, get more money in hand post-tax.
Yeah, buyback's always been, should have been a great tool to return money back to the shareholders.
Absolutely.
But the taxation did not help that. I think we will see that companies with large reserves, maybe giving this money back to their public shareholders and also being able to consolidate holdings. So it actually works quite well in my view.
I mean, that'll have to be seen depending on how many people announce buybacks now. But staying with that, Sid, I have a question for you. You know, the budget signals a long-term push to strengthen manufacturing, and, you know, we heard all about that. A lot around logistics and, I won't say tax certainty, but a lot of ease around, tax. From an investor and promoter perspective, you know, how do you see this change? How does this sort of change your conviction on build versus buy partner strategies in India over a period of time?
Absolutely, Pallavi. For Indian entrepreneurs, mid-market promoters, specifically family offices, and even, foreign providers of capital, the budget is clearly a call to consolidate, diversify, and professionalize. The three clear themes that stand out: double down on core business, backed with policy clarity and stability, and we've talked a lot about that. Broaden portfolios into sunrise sectors, basically focus on the future with manufacturing at the center, alongside opportunities in infrastructure and across the full spectrum of energy transition. And leverage simplified compliance, which you just talked about, keeping all eyes on business execution. That's really the core of my reading, to continue to enhance play of private capital in the economy, specifically in manufacturing, but even the broader services sector.
I think very well articulated, and maybe I'll sort of ask you another one. I'm tempted to ask another one is, where do you see the key opportunities for private capital beyond the areas that we've discussed, which is healthcare and data centers and infrastructure?
There is a robust domestic consumption economy. I think that will continue to see investment of private capital, whether it's in consumer products, it's in healthcare, it's in financial services. We are an economy where the engines are now all cranking up. I think this budget was focused a lot on exports and linkages with the global economy. There was not specific mention, but there is a major domestic consumption engine which continues to fire very well as we move up the prosperity index towards Viksit Bharat. People are consuming more. They will need more products and services to be able to move up or improve their living standard. So I think I look at consumer, healthcare, and financial services as three sectors that will continue to do well.
Very well articulated. And coming to exports, I think, what's also being said is that a lot of the exports have been front-ended in anticipation of the tariffs coming. So the real pain is yet to come. So there's sort of very valid reasons in giving focus to that.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I think, the government is working hard on, opening new markets, but we need to have the supply chain. And, that's a good segue to, for me to bring in Richa, right? We're more than an hour in the discussion and we haven't talked about, the T word, right? And I'm going to, continue with the dispute resolution theme. What are some of the key aspects of disputes resolution as part of this budget?
So there are a series of steps which have been taken to make dispute resolution less cumbersome. Pallavi touched upon a couple of them, but I think quite a few noteworthy ones I'd like to talk about that. One is there was an avenue of early closure of disputes which was available for cases relating to underreporting. That's considered a slightly graver offense in taxation terms. This has now been opened up for misrepresentation cases. What it means is that even if you're classified as a slightly graver offense, you seem to have committed a slightly graver offense, you can still go ahead and buy peace. You pay up your taxes, a little bit of penalty, which is lesser than the usual penalty that you would have paid in this case, which would be 200%, and you can buy peace. Now, this benefits all those people where the quantum of the dispute is small, who do not want to litigate further because the businesses are closing down, or for any of those who really want to not focus too much on dispute resolution. Dispute resolution in India is a costly affair and they want to just focus on their businesses. So this will help unclog the system. The CIT appeal level, where there are around 5.39 lakh cases stuck up, this will reduce the burden there. And of course, this reduces the need of those frequent amnesty schemes, which have to be rolled out if there's a pile-up of cases that is happening. The other significant thing which they've done is that the assessment and the penalty orders, they have been combined. Again, a significant cost reduction from a litigation perspective for all taxpayers. There is also pre-deposit of 20% which you need to make when you move to a appellate level, which is the CIT appeal level. That has been reduced to 10%, and that takes care of demands of a lot of taxpayers on the cash flow issues that they face when they undergo litigation. On the decriminalization front, again, a lot of stuff has been done. There was a Niti Aayog report which talked about that, you know, the provisions relating to criminal prosecutions that have to be streamlined. They are a bit towards the harsher side. So what has been done, not all the recommendations, but some of these actions, they have been decriminalized. The provision of rigorous imprisonment, that has been made to simple imprisonment. There was a stipulation of maximum 7 years of imprisonment that has been reduced to 2 years, and there is no threshold, there is no minimum imprisonment that is required. So all these put together, I think they make litigation somewhat less daunting for all categories of taxpayers in India.
Yeah, I think it's a change in the outlook of the regime, right? Taking the stick away from tax disputes to actually letting people come clean. I think it's a move in the right direction. Richa, also just what are the key changes that would have made a difference on the individual tax front?
Well, on individual side, the wish list is always large, but considering, you know, the changes that have happened last year, there was a significant revamp of the slab rates, and people up to the income of 12 lakh, they're not paying any taxes. So while it was on the wish list that the standard deduction be increased or the slab rates be further broadened or the rates come down, I believe fiscally there was not enough bandwidth available with the government. And when we say so, we compare with the recent numbers of personal income tax which were released. So there has been a slackening of growth as far as the personal income tax numbers go. Also, when last year these changes were introduced, the FM had indicated all these put together would cost around 1 lakh crore. So there wasn't really too much which they could have expected in this domain. But I think on overall side, a couple of things which could have really helped us create the Goldilocks moment for the taxation area would have been the TDS reforms, the TDS and the TCS reforms. Now, what has been done? TCS rate in some cases has been reduced to 2% from 5%, but there has been on the wish list of taxpayers a lot of demands on the overall revamp of the TDS domain as such. We've been talking about 2 to 3 rates so that it brings more certainty, lesser reduction, interpretational challenges that come up. Reduction in the number of sections, the TDS certificate, if they could have been done away with. They actually have become redundant after all the information being pre-populated in the government system. And the TDS ledger mode, which could have again reduced the matching of income and TDS and would have reduced a lot of compliance cost. And the other significant piece, I think, which investors and all taxpayers were really looking forward to is the recent decision in the case of Tiger Global. So that has created some bit of uncertainty on various well-established parameters. So there was a lot of anticipation and some clarity on what is the additional due diligence which is required when you're making a regular remittance outside India. What is it that you will look at as a substance when you're examining an overseas structure? Because substance is a subjective matter. And the fact that GAR invocation is gaining momentum in the recent past, there is some bit of data, some bit of clarity in the act relating to economic substance, the substance test. But the other 3 tainted element test, there isn't much clarity on that. So some clarity around that could have helped, but maybe the government, it is just a couple of weeks back that we had this decision. Maybe something comes in form of clarifications or FAQs later on. We'll wait and watch for that.
Yeah, I think that that uncertainty, I'm sure, will get clarified. But I think again, small but steps in the right direction.
Absolutely.
I think simplifying the whole regime and approach to taxation. We've talked about direct tax. I'm going to move to Krishan. How can we not talk about indirect tax? Krishan, my question to you taking the reform express theme forward and after the recent GST reforms, which budget measures stand out as the most meaningful for improving ease of doing business from a customs and international trade standpoint?
So Sid, if you talk about GST reforms, I think that it's clear that it does not form part of the budget recommendations anymore. It is part of the GST Council meetings. Those decisions are already taken. There was a bumper GST Council meeting, the last one, 56th annual meeting, where most of the reforms had already been kicked in, especially on the rates, which was very, very big change in terms of a two-tier rate structure. I think two things which did not get mentioned probably in this budget, but very important changes which were awaited for the purpose of notifications at least, are being done now, is about actually also again, brings that confidence of investors investing into India and operating in India or dealing with people in India is on the intermediary. I think 18% GST was being levied just because a person who's not located in India is taking support from a intermediary or an agent in India, and that used to result in, just because the intermediary was identifying business for you sitting outside, you were charging GST of 18%, which was the cost for the foreign supplier or the service provider. That has been done away with. That is a very, very welcome move, and it ought to be given implementation in this budget. That has been done at the back end. Similarly, practical challenges used to arise from discounts, and that is something where linking of discounts with the invoices, pre-agreeing them before the contracting was happening between service providers and manufacturers and suppliers was a prerequisite of GST, and there were a lot of litigation around that. They're doing away with that, and now that is being implemented, that all the discounts practically dealing with each other in terms of contractual world today is not something which you can preempt 2 years back and 3 years back. It is a moving world. So these are two key things which have happened. From a custom standpoint, I think being mindful of time, we talked about certain measures across sectors which we've already mentioned. I think, again, very targeted reforms in terms of further custom rationalization, only to provide that impetus to domestic manufacturing of the capabilities which India is capable of exporting are in the marine, leather, textiles, energy, defense aviation, etc. I think very small pieces of tweaking was supposed to be done to bringing the raw material at an affordable price so that you are able to scale up manufacturing and export those goods. That's one thing. There were a lot of ease of doing business related measures which across the board we have seen. The key ones, from at least from an indirect tax standpoint, from a custom standpoint, is one, there's a large RFP which is being floated by the CBIC for integrating all the customs processes digitally. That is something which was a long pending ask. GST has already been done. From a customs standpoint, integrating the framework for onboarding imports into one place, then sharing that information for risk assessment on the other side, and then also interchange that from purpose of paying the duty and getting refunds. All of that is being clubbed. I think 2 years is what they are kind of taking it to as a journey. I think very aspirational. I hope it happens in 2 years, but a very, very positive step. Litigation side, I think Richard talked about certain of those measures. In indirect tax, they specifically talked about one key litigation measure. We were hoping for a large custom amnesty scheme to cover all pending customs cases to come in, but they've done it only for the penalty part, and they're not calling it penalty. They're saying alternative fee will be charged to actually compound the penalty proceedings, at least in customs front. That is something, again, giving benefit to honest taxpayers is something which is added to that. So, giving that benefit to honest taxpayers distinguishes and creates the confidence of the investor and the taxpayers. And these are a couple of reforms which are, I think, very, very positive in terms of the way they will be looked at.
Thanks, Krishan. I think, given the time that we have, I'm just going to have one final question from every panelist, which is, and I'll start with you, Krishan. What would have been one additional ask from the FM that would have made industry investors happier? I
think since I've talked about the ecosystems and FDI from global value chain perspective, I would have definitely looked at PLIs, on certain new sectors which would have also added on, while there are certain benefits which have been extended by way of certain specific schemes in data centers, etc. I think specific PLI schemes could have also added that thrust to, again, give more investment thrust from a global perspective.
Thanks, Krishan. Vivek.
The one thing would have been a special liquidity window for NBFCs. I was really hoping for that, but hopefully in the next budget.
Amit Kumar.
Well, I think overall very balanced budget, I'll say. But one thing from a big bang reform, which everybody is expecting, is in the power distribution sector. The distribution companies as they are, I think there is a need for private sector to get involved. because the kind of investment which is required in this country is quite huge. So that is what, maybe, during the course of the year this might come up, but some kind of a rollout of scheme or plan would have been better this way.
Thanks, Amit. Amit Khanna, quickly.
Yeah, I think if you had asked me, I would have asked government to invest and incentivize more on the fundamental research. We have the right talent, we have the right ecosystem, the colleges, and we need to come out with our models, our own AI ecosystem, which can rule the world very easily.
Raman, if I may ask you the same question.
Yeah, I think the R&D and the innovations lacked a little bit of less focus this time. I think we need to unlock our potential by, giving enough cues and thrust in the budget for these.
Richa.
I think some big bang tedious reforms, which could have actually been done in a tax neutral manner, but could have reduced compliance burden for taxpayers in a very big manner.
Pallavi, your
I'd
views?
say the advanced ruling authority. I think that's something that brings a lot of finality to positions that foreign investors take. It is there, but I think it's just not functioning the way it was supposed to. So more teeth to that would have been very welcome from a global investor's perspective.
Thanks. Jaijit, last but not the least.
I think I would have liked if inverted duty structures were further addressed. For example, DGWP to viscose staple fiber, there is an inverted duty structure. Also, structural cost differences. Natural gas is 7 times more expensive in India than in Russia or China, and therefore everything downstream such as isopropyl alcohol, ammonium nitrate, they're that much more expensive. And therefore we do need a proper BCD to address these structural cost differences.
Thank you. With that, we had a very engaging and interesting discussion. I thoroughly enjoyed this Sunday afternoon. I think a budget which focused on resilience, future sunrise sectors, simplifying things and creating jobs. All in all, a well-balanced budget that is in line to us becoming a Viksit Bharat. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for your time this afternoon.